It was supposed to be a quiet weekend at my lake cabin. Just me, the water, and some peace for once. I'd barely unpacked when I heard tires crunching up the gravel driveway. That's when she showed up. You know the type. Perfectly pressed. Polo shirt, clipboard in hand. That look like she owns the place even if she doesn't. Yep, HOA Karen. I didn't even know there was an HOA this far out in the woods. But somehow, she found her way to my cabin with a big attitude and an even bigger demand. She said she was monitoring the neighborhood, and that I needed to share my cabin with one of her approved guests for the weekend. I laughed at first, thinking it was a weird joke, but she was dead serious. Apparently, she'd promised some of her friends a relaxing lake getaway, and figured my cabin would be perfect. When I told her politely that no one was staying here but me, she lost it. I mean, full volume screeching in the middle of the driveway. It was like a scene from a bad reality show. Arms waving, threats, flying, her little dog barking from her SUV like backup. What she didn't know, what made this all so much sweeter, is that someone very important was already inside the cabin. Someone who just happened to overhear everything. Yep, the mayor. Turns out he and I go way back, and he was crashing at my place for a quiet retreat. He'd asked to keep it low-key, no one knowing he was even here. So, when Karen went off, she had no idea she was screaming like a lunatic in front of one of the most powerful people in town. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the mayor opened the door. The moment that door creaked open, everything froze. Karen spun. Around mid-rant, her face still red from shouting. And there he was, Mayor Thompson standing in the doorway with a coffee mug in hand, wearing a hoodie and looking very much like a man who hadn't planned on getting involved. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. You could almost hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how she'd just yelled at a random guy who turned out to be the mayor. Now, here's where it gets even more awkward. Karen, who moments ago had been yelling about how I was violating neighborhood unity, suddenly snapped into this weird fake smile mode. She started talking all fast and sweet, like none of that just happened. "Oh, Mayor Thompson, I didn't realize you were here. What a surprise." Her voice went up about 2 octaves. She kept glancing at me like I was supposed to play along and pretend she hadn't just accused me of being uncooperative with community standards. Thing is, Mayor Thompson didn't say much at first. He just raised an eyebrow and sipped his coffee like he was watching a drama unfold on TV. I could tell he was giving her a chance to dig her own hole, and boy, did she start digging. She went on about how she was just trying to enforce cabin-sharing courtesy, whatever that means, and how sometimes people like me don't fully appreciate community values. She even said something about how the lakefront should be shared among residents deemed suitable by the HOA board. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a cabin. This woman thought she had control over everything and everyone around the lake, and she was used to getting her way. But what she didn't realize was the mayor wasn't the only one she'd underestimated. Mayor Thompson stepped out onto the porch, calm as ever, but you could feel the shift in energy. Karen tried to recover, still plastering on that smile, but her hands were fidgeting with her clipboard like it was a security blanket. The thing is, she wasn't just some nosy neighbor. Turns out she'd recently wormed her way onto the HOA board for the nearby lake community. And from what I've heard, she'd been making people's lives miserable ever since. Petty rules, unannounced inspections, even fines for lawn chairs being the wrong color. Classic HOA drama, but out here, it was turning into something bigger. Karen started talking about how my cabin technically sat within the extended influence zone of the HOA, a term she made up right there on the spot. I didn't even buy into the HOA when I bought this place years ago. It was just outside their border, which is exactly why I picked it. But now, with lakefront property in high demand, the board had apparently been trying to push their limits, bringing in new regulations without actual authority. She was acting like a sheriff in a town that never hired her. While she went on about unauthorized guest stays and unregistered use of community dock space, the mayor stayed quiet, but his expression said everything. I knew he was letting her pile it on for a reason, and then it hit me. This wasn't just about a cabin. Something else was going on. I remembered overhearing the mayor on the phone earlier that morning, something about land zoning and a proposal coming up for review. This little stretch of lakefront land might be on someone's radar for development. And Karen, or someone, behind her, wanted control before it hit the public. That explained her sudden interest in my place, and why she was so desperate to get her people in. But I still didn't know who else was involved, or how far they were willing to go. The air was getting thick with tension. Karen was still rambling, stacking one made-up rule on top of another, trying to paint me as some kind of rogue cabin owner threatening the integrity of the lake community. Mayor Thompson leaned against the railing now, arms crossed, saying nothing, but watching everything. I could feel something shifting behind the scenes, like this was no longer about me turning down her request. This was about power, influence, and someone trying to lock in control before the rest of us even realized what was happening. Karen finally stopped talking long enough to take a breath, and that's when another car pulled up. A sleek black SUV, windows tinted, and out stepped a man in a sharp suit. He didn't look like the kind of guy who spent weekends fishing or roasting marshmallows. He looked like a lawyer. Or worse, someone from a real estate firm. He gave Karen a nod like they were familiar. Then he looked at me, then the mayor, then back at the cabin like he was sizing it up. That's when my stomach dropped. The man introduced himself as Mr. Collins and said he was representing a group interested in revitalizing the lakefront area. He casually mentioned that some of the older cabins, like mine, might fall under potential reassessment if new zoning passed. That's when the mayor's jaw tightened. He still didn't speak, but you could feel it. Something had crossed a line. Karen jumped in again, acting like she was part of some official effort, throwing out phrases like increasing property value, streamlined community vision, and modern recreational infrastructure. It was all code. Code for replacing old cabins with vacation rentals, condos, maybe even a private marina. I realized right then this wasn't just about her ego. This was about a land grab. And somehow, my cabin was the first domino they wanted to push. But they weren't counting on the mayor being here. And they definitely weren't expecting what was about to happen next. Just as I was about to say something, Mayor Thompson finally spoke, but not to Karen and not to me. He turned straight to Mr. Collins and said, "I thought your firm wasn't moving forward without a vote." That hit like a slap in the silence. Karen's fake smile twitched, and Mr. Collins paused, clearly not expecting to be recognized. The mayor's tone was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it. You could tell this wasn't the first time he'd dealt with people like Collins. That's when the second twist hit, and honestly, it shook me. Collins didn't deny it. He just nodded slowly and said, "Things have changed. Some board members agreed to move ahead. Unofficially." He didn't say it directly, but the message was loud and clear. Karen had gone behind the scenes with a few others, trying to push the project through before the rest of the town could react. No public meeting, no formal vote, just quiet pressure and shady deals. And then it got worse. The mayor asked one simple question. "Did you already file permits?" Collins didn't answer right away, but Karen did. She muttered something about preliminary paperwork and holding rights. That's when I saw it. On her clipboard, tucked behind the usual HOA forms, was a printed layout. A development map. My cabin wasn't just a nuisance to them, it was already marked for removal. Not maybe, not possibly. It was on the plan, boxed in red like it was already theirs. That's when the real fear kicked in. This wasn't just some power-hungry HOA drama anymore. This was a full-on scheme. And now I was staring down two people who were willing to bend rules, cross lines, and maybe worse, to take what they wanted. I didn't know who else was involved or how far up this went. But I did know one thing. They picked the wrong cabin and the wrong weekend to try and take it. The room was spinning for most people in that moment, but for me, everything had finally snapped into focus. I stood up, calmly walked to the front, and placed a thick binder of documents on the table. I looked Mark dead in the eyes and said, "Before you dig yourselves any deeper, you might want to read this." Inside that binder were certified copies of my land deeds, complete with survey maps and county records. Proof that not only did I own the land the HOA was threatening me over, but their own headquarters, the so-called community clubhouse, technically sat on a parcel I had purchased years earlier as part of that same deal. Gasps echoed around the room. Mark tried to argue, but the documents spoke for themselves. A county representative I'd invited quietly stepped forward and confirmed everything. That shut him up real quick. Then the lawyer from the development firm stepped in again and announced that his client was not interested in lake access for the community. They were preparing to build a private lakeside retreat. HOA permissions? Not needed. The room erupted. Neighbors who had blindly trusted the board started demanding answers. Mark looked pale, trying to calm everyone down, but it was over. That should have been the end of it. Conflict resolved. HOA exposed. But then came the final twist. Later that week, I got a call from the development firm's lawyer. He thanked me for cleaning up the chaos, then offered to buy my mansion for triple what I paid. Not because they needed the land, but because they didn't want someone else owning property in the middle of their future luxury project. It wasn't personal, it was just business. So now I had a choice. Stay in the home I fought to protect, or walk away with more money than I ever expected from the very people who'd just helped me take down the HOA. Funny how things work out. I sat with that offer for a few days, thinking it over. After everything, the lies, the threats, the stress, it was hard to believe it had come to this. The mansion I'd built, the quiet life I'd planned, had turned into the center of a power struggle I never asked for. But in the end, I realized something important. The house wasn't what mattered. It was the principle. I didn't fight the HOA just to keep a view or hold on to a piece of land. I fought because people deserve to be treated with respect, not bullied by those in charge. So I took the deal. I sold the mansion to the development firm, made sure the neighbors were protected in the transition, and even used part of the payout to help a few of them who had been hit hardest by HOA fees and penalties. The firm promised to build responsibly and actually involve the community in their plans. Whether they keep that promise or not, time will tell. But at least now the neighborhood knows the power they hold when they ask questions and stand together. As for Mark and the rest of the HOA board, they quietly stepped down, one by one, once. The documents went public and the legal pressure kicked in. No more fake rules, no more scare tactics. I moved into a new place not far away, still near the lake, but quieter, more private. I don't need the biggest house on the block. Just peace and the knowledge that I stood my ground when it counted. So if you ever find yourself in a battle with an HOA, remember this. Know your rights, document everything, and never assume they hold all the power. Sometimes, the homeowner owns more than just the house. They own the whole story.